Greetings, everybody. How you doing? This is KIN214, and this is a quick prep video regarding ways to calculate performance. And as you go further into this module, we'll go over different ways to calculate both aerobic and anaerobic, if you will, or more cardiovascular style training versus strength and power. But there are different ways to evaluate performance and ways to calculate performance. And this is an overview just to kind of go ahead and highlight two main ways to kind of evaluate and kind of look at performance through particular prisms or from a particular perspective. So, we talked about tonnage, right? We talked about tonnage a couple presentations ago. And tonnage was the cumulative amount of weight moved in a particular exercise, bicep curls, dumbbell bench press, etc. We've also talked about quantifying work just kind of loosely in terms of how far somebody runs, how far they're jumping, how many touches they have on the ground. And what we hope to have over these next 2 or 3 presentations is a better understanding of how to quantify that and how it relates to the person that's actually standing in front of you. So when we talk workloads, many times you have to kind of clarify what we're actually talking about, because there's so much that goes into workloads, and it's different depending upon what the heck you're doing and with whom. So, different clients will require different types of workloads or a different type of training stimuli to get a training response. Whether it's an elderly person, a high school football player, or even within a particular sport. I know we talked a little bit about some sport-specific training loosely in other presentations, where if you look at a baseball pitcher has to be very explosive and poppy over and over and over and over again, many times throughout an inning, whereas an infielder has to move quickly and be very agile to chase down a ball in the infield, and an outfielder will stand around for quite a while. He'll have to run and cover, if there's a throw made or if there's a ball hit to that person, but they have to then sprint maybe 20 meters, 30 meters to catch a ball, then they jog back, and then they rest again. So even the demands within a particular sport are different. So it's important to kind of understand who's in front of you client-wise, what it is they're looking to accomplish, and particularly if they're in a sport, what it is you need to do to elicit that training response. So you kind of have to evaluate the needs of the person that's over there in front of you. And when you talk about general population, I tend to look at it kind of like a pie chart, right? In terms of what their needs are. If we look at these two right here, on the left-hand side, this is my typical Ida with her blue hair. She's going to go off and go play bridge. Here we have one heck of a tennis player on the right-hand side of the screen. Both are female, and when you look at this in terms of their age differences and their demands, who needs balance and stability? Which one needs flexibility? How about strength? What about power? How about some agility? As a practitioner, I can tell you yes to all, but if we were to look at on a pie chart, this side of the screen, her pie chart is going to look a heck of a lot different than her pie chart, right? So in terms of power, agility, etc., it's going to look different here than over here. And that pie chart holds true across so many things, but in this example, as we'll see, go ahead and bump this over, you look at the gal to the left, she requires, 50% of her time is all about balance, 25% flexibility, then to a lesser degree strength, to a lesser degree power, and 5% wise agility. And when you look at the tennis player, let me get myself out of the way here, you look in her case, balance is much less. The flexibility is still a requirement, it's still there, but it is much less. Strength, though, is much greater. Power is a huge component of the game. Power, and then agility is a huge component of the game. That's in the blue. So you have agility in blue, power in green, strength, and then to a lesser degree, balance and flexibility. And over a year, her pie chart changes. So, when I look at people and I talk to people, I tend to kind of look at them and there's a little pie chart floating around above their head. And this is what I see. When I have a tennis player who comes in who's apparently fit and healthy, and she's played tennis for a number of years and she's rated at, a 5-0 player or an open player, this is the kind of pie chart that I see floating around above her head. When Ida comes in, who has blue hair and plays bridge maybe twice a week, and she's worried about slipping and falling on the ice as we get into the wintertime here in Chicago, this is the pie chart that I see. So it's a way that I kind of quantify the person, and actually in a way kind of almost qualify the person that's in front of me to help frame up what I'd like to do with them workout-wise. When we measure and we start talking about these different components that we just saw in the pie chart, right? Well, if we look on the left side, right, you have a person, how much weight are they moving? It's a measure of strength. How many repetitions? That's volume. How fast a weight is particularly moved. If you push that boulder up a hill for speed in the quickest amount of time or shortest amount of time possible, that's power. How far did a person broad jump? That's power oriented as well. Sit and reach, how far is their, or how good is their flexibility? And then how long can they stand on one foot? That's balance oriented. Now, when the person is moving the weight or they're performing a particular movement pattern, it becomes just how smooth were they when they were moving? How fluid was their change of direction? Is there any background noise in any other body segments when attempting to do the movement? And while they're standing on one foot, is there any particular wobble or compensation patterns that happen while they're standing on one foot? Very common. You can have a person stand on one foot or stand on a BOSU on one foot, and they'll wobble all over the place. And there's a lot of this going on with the BOSU as communications happening up and down the central nervous system. Somebody who trains and does balance and coordination, that refinement of movement gets better and tighter, and the signal that goes up the afferent and down the efferent side of the central nervous system actually becomes more refined. And you find that your people will go through a bit of a learning curve, but then they'll actually have pretty smooth movement patterns. And it's just a matter of viewing these types of evaluation tools versus these types. If we were to qualify them and kind of like put them in groups, you'd have on the one side a quantitative side. How much weight is moved? How many repetitions? How fast was it moved? These are things that are quantifiable, things that you can actually count and measure. They are very objective. They have an absolute. You either do this or you don't. You either jump this high or you don't. You either move this amount of weight or you don't. Qualitative, though, requires kind of like the discerning eye to be able to pick out how smooth a movement pattern is after you've seen 10,000 people perform the same movement. How smooth is this person's movement pattern relative to the other 9,999? How about the change of direction? Are there ways you can refine that movement pattern that has a spillover or a trickle-down effect into other areas of their speed, agility, and quickness that allows them to be much faster? Sure, you can be super powerful, but it's the technique that allows you to be very efficient. And there's two components to that. When you get into like a Kinesiology 114 course where we talk speed, agility, and quickness, it's all about, sure, you have to be very explosive and very powerful, but if you are not technically proficient, you are going to have difficulty applying that force and more accurately getting force out of the ground, equal and opposite reaction, and having any kind of force yield, which is a totally different conversation outside of this one, but just keep that in mind. And when you look at like a qualitative measure, something that's more subjective is the foot wobbling. Now we can kind of quantify that a little bit, and you can make the argument you can quantify a number of different things over here, whether it's through some type of scale or some type of evaluation. But at the end of the day, it really requires us as movement practitioners to evaluate that movement pattern, and that's what makes it more qualitative. How good of quality is that movement? So in the next couple presentations, you're going to see one will provide kind of an overview in terms of strength and power as it relates to the participant. And I'll talk about some people I've coached in my past where they were vastly different body types in front of me, and even within the sport demands themselves, how they're kind of different and how you have to evaluate those. And then also with the general population, how you kind of can quantify workloads for people and get an idea of just how much of a training stimulus you're placing on the human organism. And then the other video will be more in terms of conditioning. You have heart rate reserve methods, maximal heart rate in terms of being able to calculate your heart rate, but how you use a heart rate reserve method or a Carvona method to calculate heart rate, how resting heart rate plays into that factor, and then also how something as simple as heart rate variability plays in now. And that's another term that's really made its place in the fitness industry over the last couple of years. So what I want you to do though is when you view these videos, really kind of look at it through the concept of this objective and subjective evaluation point. And it's this prism that you have to kind of look through where you kind of go, okay, this is objective, this is subjective, and one, we're hitting a particular number, a time or a speed or a distance. The other, as a fitness practitioner or a movement practitioner, I'm evaluating that particular movement pattern. I'm evaluating and providing feedback and cueing that person to put them into a more optimal situation or a better place. And that really kind of becomes key in what you're going to be doing as a practitioner is this side and being able to correctly evaluate and correctly cue people to do the right thing. All right, guys. So with that, I'm going to break off on this one, and we'll move on to the other presentations. Signing off.